So think back at the past 6 or 7 hours since you woke up in the morning until now. What do you use your eyesight for? Was it to pick the seats in the aisles of this theater? Or was it to select your favorite shoes to come to the event? Or maybe did you measure the amount of orange juice that you poured in your cup at breakfast? Or chose your lunch by how delicious something looked? This is quickly going to become a silly exercise because the number of things that start with that light entering our eyes is enormous. In fact, 60% of our brains are involved with information that isn't somehow related to our sight. The tiny amount of light that enters our pupils in every moment etches us and shapes us in ways that we often discredit. If you are blind, like many of the people that I work with, things can be different. The rising sun is the feeling of warmth, and a busy intersection is a series of rushing sounds conducted towards us by the wind. Unlike a novel or a movie, there is nobody around us to describe these moments to us. Setting becomes something much harder to grasp, and we lose a lot of the narration in our lives. The incentive to explore and to learn can sometimes turn into a mystery that can sometimes even feel scary. If you're visually impaired, you want to find more ways of inventing that narrator in our lives. It's a bit like when you visit a town for the first time and you ask a local, hey, what's around here? Because your worldview is limited to these 4 walls. And everything beyond that is uncharted. It's a mystery. Likewise, if you are blind or visually impaired, your worldview is limited to the mind and the other senses perceived by your body. So how can we create this narrator? How can we create something or someone who can paint the world around us, perhaps lend an eye, and maybe formulate a description for someone who is otherwise unable to see? Think of ways in which we can actually create this entity. It's not a very easy task. Having someone beside you who can continuously tell you what is going on in the immediate world around you is not always possible. I mean, we try and teach a guide dog English, but that's not going to be too hard either. This is a problem for 285 million people. So there has to be something that we can do better. And so I thought, with the exponential advances in the field of artificial intelligence, why don't we create a machine that can help people who cannot see understand their surroundings? There's something called a convolutional neural network, which could help us solve this task. They were pioneered in the 80s at Bell Labs, and they used gigantic computers to understand the handwriting on checks. You see, handwriting has a lot of variation. If you take 100 of us and you tell us to write the word tree, you'll get 100 very different styles of handwriting. If one of you is a doctor, then can be even more styles. And it's a problem that computers are not very good at solving until these neural networks came into place. But they require a lot of computing power, and they require a lot of data. So most of their potential remained untapped until very recent years, around 2011 or so. And so time has passed, and Moore's law has taken its place. Computers have become smaller, more powerful, and these bulky machines that were able to read checks are now the size of my thumb. If you happen to be visually impaired, I have regular-sized thumbs. So something interesting about neural networks is that they are inspired by biological processes. In fact, artificial neural networks, as you saw in the previous slides, are nothing but an architecture of processes. And the particular ones that we'll be talking about are inspired by the animal visual cortex. So we decided to create an artificial intelligence that would be able to describe the world around us, and we called it Aipoly. Think about it as a simulation of the way we perceive sight, created by humans and run on computers. Aipoly is able to recognize objects in real time and colors and speaks them out loud. and we packaged it into a tiny smartphone app. Here's one of our first users.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, like I've got a pair of earphones here.
Yes.
Do you think it would be able to identify that?
Let's try it. White and gray.
You are looking at a new Apple earbuds.
Hey, wow. That is all right. That's like magic. I mean, I don't know how they can. Wow, that's so impressive. I don't even know what to say. I'm just kind of shocked.
And so a narrator was born. It's not exactly Charles Dickens, but it can help build a mental picture. In fact, when we first released the first version of Aipoly in January, it knew about 1,000 different objects. 1,000 terms, that's the vocabulary of a 3-year-old. And I guess that even just 1,000 words can help build a setting, help create more possibilities. One of the first people to review our technology was Mark, who wrote to us, "The first time I used it, I cried. I'm legally blind and my vision, even with glasses, goes into complete blur at about arm's length. I'm not gonna lie, when I used it and it immediately told me what was in front of me, I cried. That doesn't happen very often for a middle-aged man." And like Mark, today over 40,000 people are using artificial intelligence to identify the world around them. This single AI can be downloaded onto someone's phone, and it comes with knowledge and experience of a small child. And it learns. In fact, since we launched 2 months ago, our partners have been added millions of images to what's called the training data set, so that soon Aipoly will be able to tell 5,000 items apart. It's 5,000 terms. That's the vocabulary of a 4.5-year-old, packaged into a tiny app. It runs entirely on a phone. So now we've created this artificial intelligence. It runs on some very powerful computers that we carry in our pockets. In fact, our phones are 10 times more powerful than the latest generation ones, than the supercomputer that beat Kasparov at chess in 1997. They're having this little mind of their own. So a good question to ask ourselves is, what kind of world is the world that Aipoly sees? What's somewhat magical about neural networks is that they don't require to see every single object in the world in order to understand what they are. Aipoly has never really seen the shoes that you're wearing or the chair that you're sitting on, but in the millions of images that it was trained on, in the hours of videos that it's watched, the most similar concepts that it was trained on that looked like those objects were called chairs and shoes. And so whenever an image passes through its synapse in this real-time video feed, it will try and express the word that makes most sense to it based on what it's looking at. But ultimately, this data contains our human bias. And it is a bias of many, many people, the average of the worldview of all the people that have contributed to the data set. In fact, there are thousands of users of Aipoly who use the app every day to teach it new items. And every time it sees a single item pictured 1,000 times, it will learn something new. And this happens on, and slowly it gains this intelligence, this worldview that is a mesh of all these people that have contributed and the efforts of those who trained this artificial intelligence. And ultimately, in some very strange way, it becomes a result of the parenthood of thousands of people. This little AI has seen different cultures and worldviews and ways of seeing and describing the world. And it, although at the core it thinks mathematically, when it expresses itself, it's very much individual. I'll give you some quick examples. If I show it this picture of spaghetti, one of the first things that it will start thinking about is,
there might be meatballs.
And if I show it this picture of this is an Australian crocodile, it will think,
it's probably an alligator.
And that is because a lot of the training of this app comes from the captions of users from the United States, where spaghetti and meatballs go together for whatever reason. And there are very, very few crocodile, and whereas Florida is full of alligators. And the list goes on and on, these interesting quirks. If I show it this picture of two people kissing, the first thing we'll think about is love, even though no matter the gender, no matter the age difference, and the list goes on. And what's bittersweet to think is that this artificial intelligence is helping define the world for those who are visually impaired. But in some way, in the future, it will also help define yours. As a matter of fact, about 1/3 of our users are from Japan. And until just a handful of days ago, the app did not speak Japanese. So we asked ourselves, why are they using it? And these are all young people who are using Aipoly to learn English. They point it at the objects around them, they hear the pronunciation, they read, and in some strange way, this AI has gone past its intended use. And it is learning from its users and having a little impact on people's lives. It's extraordinary to think what our creations, what journeys will they have when we enter an era in which artificial intelligence is able to interpret the real physical world. And we're lucky because the field of deep learning and AI has seen unprecedented collaboration from across the world. Aipoly stands on the shoulders of researchers, of tech startups, of universities, and a strong open source culture that has made this possible. And of course, you, because a lot of the data that AIs like Aipoly learn from is produced by users like us. We are shaping many of their worldviews. And so, think about it. An artificial intelligence, a narrator for the moment around you. Wouldn't that be great? Aipoly is now learning to produce full sentences. And it may not be there to help you now, to be that narrator in your life, but you can help it become the narrator of the lives of many others. Those who cannot see the pastel orange light of a sunset, or the switching colors of rushing cars in a busy intersection. These technologies are not just here to take over our jobs or to turn the world into paper clips. They're here to improve our lives in deep and meaningful ways. And invite you to join me in making this decade one where we treat our intelligent machines as problem solvers. The kind of enhancements that will one day perhaps even make us superhuman. Much like today, people like Rob or Marek have gained, and many other blind people have gained the ability to listen to the narration of the beautiful physical world that they've been living in all their lives. Thank you.